Okay, well, on just about every issue facing investors, there is no stronger voice in Congress than Barney Frank, the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, and he joins Lizzie O'Leary on Capitol Hill. Lizzie.
Thanks so much, Betty. I'm joined by Chairman Frank, and I want to get to the issue of executive compensation. You have said that the administration's plan in some ways doesn't go far enough. You'd like to see extra rules imposed by the SEC, maybe even some form of clawback or spreading out compensation over time to keep performance in line. Keep compensation in line with performance. Does that mean you wouldn't support a reform package if it didn't include that?
Well, you say support a reform package. We are the Congress. We legislate. So I'm not sure where you think this reform package is going to come from. There's nothing that's going to descend from the sky or even the White House that we have to vote on yes or no. We will work together in a constructive way to put something forward. I also should say I agree with a major part of the administration's plan. It's their endorsement of the say-on-pay concept, which empowers shareholders. And that's something we tried to do in 2007. I agree with them, so I'm for that. I also agree with the criteria they say should apply. And there is a general consensus that compensation structures, not amounts, but structures, incentivize excessive risk. What the Secretary proposes is that we try to beef up the independence of the compensation committee. I don't think boards of directors alone can do this. I think their intimate relationships that's of a necessity with the CEOs keep them from one day a year being the arm's length labor management negotiators. So yes, I would have the SEC not get very specific, but say you have to have a set of compensation procedures that do not excessively incentivize risk. That is, you can't have a situation where if somebody takes a risk and it pays off in a very short time, they get the money, and even if it later collapses, they don't pay it back, or if it collapses right away. So what the SEC should do, in my judgment, is to say, here are the rules. You have to set compensation rules that give you a reward if the risk pays off, but subject you to some constraints if the risk don't.
Well, what if we've got a situation on Capitol Hill today? We've got Ken Lewis here, a place where the firm suffered major losses. Is that a place where you see the risks not paying off, or is that a place where you should see management changes?
Well, there's a separate issue there, because in the case of the Bank of America, as is very clear, you didn't have an independent decision made by the CEO. You had pressure from the Secretary of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, I believe, urging him to take this one particular decision, the one involving Merrill Lynch. And that's a more complicated issue, because the federal government was involved in that. Under the Bush administration felt that if the Bank of America reconsidered its purchase of Merrill Lynch, that would be a real problem. But in general, I would say, we're not talking about necessarily being fired, but if you are told, if you take a risk and it makes money for the company, you make money, and if it loses money for the company, nothing happens to you, a rational person will take more risks than a reasonable balance should dictate.
There have been executives like John Mack who have said that executive compensation restrictions or guidelines by the government put them at a disadvantage with foreign firms. I suspect you don't buy that argument.
I respect John Mack, but that's complete nonsense. In fact, American compensation practice far exceed foreign firms. Japanese and German and British, they don't get the same amount of money. That does not pass the laugh test. The fact is that American compensation practices have wildly exceeded those. By the way, say on pay, we're often told that England is our major competitor.
Non-binding say on pay.
Yes, the same thing. Well, that's right. That's say on pay. That's what they have in England. So how can we be putting our people at a competitive disadvantage with England when we are adopting a rule that the English have had for many years? The English have had say on pay for many years. In fact, recently a number of companies have simply have had a rejection and have had a rewrite. So that's an example, I think, of the falsity of that notion. We are, in this case, taking something the English have had. I don't see how that puts us at a competitive disadvantage with the British.
Well, let me ask you about regulatory reform. We are obviously heading toward this huge overhaul. Does it feel to you like we are moving toward a council of regulators instead of power consolidated under one agency like the Federal Reserve?
Yes, I think, well, first of all, they're going to be more powerful under regulators. Derivatives are now under-regulated, and they have to be regulated, some by the SEC and some by the CFTC. Hedge funds should have to register with the SEC. There's been too little regulation. AIG and some others that were theoretically regulated by the OTS, that's like being regulated by the meter maids. So I'm sorry, these are complicated questions. When you ask me a question, please
go ahead.
Answer it. Well, the biggest point I'm making is that we're not simply shuffling the responsibilities. We are enhancing the regulatory reach of all of these agencies. Given that, I don't think one single agency like the FSA in England is the best way to go. We are going to abolish, I hope, the Office of Thrift Supervision, but otherwise I think we keep the current structure, but we enhance the powers.
Well, you brought up AIG, which brings up this other question. A draft Republican proposal is circulating that would basically put non-bank financials into bankruptcy and allow the courts to do the wind down there. Would you like to see the FDIC have that wind down authority for non-bank financials?
Yeah, I think it would be a combination of the primary regulator of that agency and the FDIC. I don't think simply putting them into bankruptcy under regular bankruptcy procedures is adequate. And here I agree with the Bush administration. It was Secretary Paulson and Chairman Bernanke, two Bush appointees, who first told us over a year ago that we needed to get resolution authority, as it's called. Strange word because it's really dissolution authority, to wind these down. I think simply treating AIG or Lehman Brothers under normal bankruptcy does not take account of the particular strategic impact they have. So yes, we do need to pass legislation to allow them to be wound down. But I think here that the Bush administration, Secretary Paulson and Bernanke and others got it right, and simple bankruptcy is not enough.
We've got about 45 seconds left. I'm curious, you've had a lot of success in moving some of your bills through your committee through the House. Do you feel that you have as expedient a partner in the Senate this time? Yes.
In the first place, we've worked together with Senator Dodd on credit card reform and on some of the efforts to alleviate mortgage problems. Beyond that, the crisis in the economy is so great that I think the whole country is ready to move. And we also now have, unlike previously, a